Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, depending upon when you're listening to this. It is me, Professor McQueen, and we are going to be going into the last module of this class. We already have been with talking about social institutions, but now we're going to talk about social change and some environmental sociology. Allow me a moment, as usual, to share my screen, and we will get to it. Super excited. Okie dokie, here we go. Let's get going here. So we are going to be talking about social change. I am Professor McQueen, and I'm excited to be going through this with you. Let's get to it, yeah? All right, so social change is going to be an interesting conversation. We've been facing a lot of uphill battles right now with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and I'm going to be hinting at some things in this lecture as towards how to understand circumstances as such, right? So what is, sorry, what is social change? Well, social change is a large shift in the ways that society is structured. The norms, values, and systems that we are within, the social institutions, have impacts on our day-to-day life. Essentially, a change in the way society is organized is the way that you can look at this really simply on your slide. But what you're looking at is, why do things change? Well, when certain things hit the wall, as Merton says, people react in the different ways, right? Innovation, rebellion, ritualism, et cetera, et cetera. And these different ways impact how change is spurred, or how we are able to see or focus on that which is going to be changed or not changed, right? When society functions in a different way than it used to, we start seeing social change. Not everyone's for it, not everyone's against it. There's a massive shift in osculation in how this is understood. And what essentially you're looking at is agency and collective behavior that we all are ascertained to achieve together, and the expectations of how life is to be understood within our circumstance. So agency, important to know this for your quiz, the ability to choose, to take action, have free will for decision. You all have agency in many ways for the first time here at Arizona State University. And I say this to my students in person, in lecture class, in person, face-to-face lectures, that I don't enforce an attendance policy. I never have, never will. But the reason be, and I do it in the sense, if no one starts showing up, then I enforce social control, punishment by group behavior. But you have the choice to show up to classes. And many of you later will probably say, I wish I'd showed up to more, because this is the time that you're paying for. Your ability to act on your own is your own agency and your own choice. And it is your decision to be a part of or not be a part of the moves, to your point to vote, to your point to be involved, protest. How you act is really based upon your own agency. And a lot of times it's also impacted by the herd, the group. And this is collective agency, the ability for people to choose to take action together. Well, a lot of that happens to do with following the herd mentality. We want to be a part of the movement. We don't want to be a part of the situation. Maybe we didn't decide that we liked it, but now everyone we know is doing it. So we start doing collective agency, the act together and act in action, right? And then collective behavior, as I said, is the action that people take together. So these types of acts and interactions build into the expectations and realities that we face every day. These are really cringy videos just showing the idea of group behavior. I'm not going to play them. I'm going to be changing them soon for my deck. However, think about how much TikTok has impacted the virality and the importance of music artists. There's been a big movement talking about this effectively, to the dynamicism of how many artists can't even release their films, music, movies, etc. anymore without approval from the record company after going viral, because this ability of collective behavior and being able to have something that everyone can share in and share through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube really creates this movement. It's also been able to predict things such as market shifts and oscillations and make people gain a hit song or not make a hit song. There's been a massive increase in the monetization of collective behavior as well as virality. And it's really going to be a big part of your generation's socialization as towards becoming influencers. There's a line now being drawn between, is the movie star dead, and as the movie star becoming the influencer. And this is an interesting conversation, because collective behavior has become a new monetization method for marketing companies that I used to work for. How can we make a viral video go TikTok? How can we make a viral video on YouTube, TikTok, or Instagram to increase our views, which will then increase our overall capital earnings? And social change is no different. How can we get a movement to gain notoriety? BLM was able to grow massively and gain a lot of benefits, but then took a few hits when some of the people, and people be faulty at all times, ended up taking that money and using it for personal gain. So if we can get a movement to gain virality, we can get a movement to be able to incur more people being a part of it, which has ebbs and flows, cons and pros, which we'll go into in a bit. So there are different types of crowds. This is important for you to know for your quizzes. Casual crowd, an aggregate of people who are in the same place, not interacting. This could be like a coffee shop, right? You're all there, not necessarily interacting. Acting crowd is the The general purpose is to take action. Think about protest rallies, political events, right? Expressive crowd, this purpose is emotional. You can have an expressive and an acting crowd at a political rally or a protest. And a conventional crowd, they come together for a general purpose, like a sporting event or a school gathering, right? If you're going to a Sun Devils game, these can be an idea of a conventional crowd. There's a few questions on your quizzes pertaining to acting, casual, and conventional and expressive crowd. Familiarize yourself with the readings on this and get an understanding what the difference is between, let's say, a conventional crowd versus a casual crowd, or an acting crowd versus a conventional crowd. And these can intersect as well, which is a really good thing to know, that these are not individual. They just play into the overall center point, like in the middle here, of how we act day to day. So let's look at some collective behavior. Essentially, a mass or a large number of people is called a mass, right? This is the large number of people who will be in common interest, do not have to be close in proximity. Laughlin in 1993 talked about this. This can be viewed as video games such as World of Warcraft, right? Facebook hobby groups, podcasts, etc. You're sharing a large interest, but you don't have to be close. This has been massively expanded upon with the internet. You have huge groups of masses meeting together in order to be able to facilitate an idea and not have to be close in proximity. Public, this is the idea of an unorganized, relatively diffuse group of people who share an idea. This could be a concert, right? Political parties, social movement, ideologies. This could be similar. It's somewhat unorganized and diffused of different variations, beliefs, and opinions, but they share an idea. And so this purpose brings them together as a public group. That's why you have political parties and social movements and ideologies. These two are similar, but what is the key difference? Well, let's go into that. Reformative movements, right? Green movements advocating a sect of ecological laws, movements against pornography, mothers against drunk driving. These are looking for reform. Revolutionary movement, civil rights movement, gay rights movement, anti-globalist movements, feminist movements. We've seen a lot of impact on the feminist movements with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but these are things trying to create revolutionary, la revolution. These are the ideas of trying to create social change. Religious and redemptive movements, Heaven's Gates, so cults, right? The Branch Davidians, if it's in your book, they'll read about that if you find it interesting. Alcoholics Anonymous, these either have religious or redemptive purposes. So you're either trying to find religion and find meaning behind it, or you're trying to fix yourself, AA and other types of retreats, right? And then we have alternative movements. Obviously, the movement towards Gen Z starting to embrace My Chemical Romance. As an elder emo, I approve of this. No, sorry. It's the idea of there's an alternative dynamic of things that are against the mainstream norms. Holistic medications can be one, holistic movements as well. Eating alternatives such as vegan diets. My mother's a raw vegan. Mother-in-law, sorry, is a raw vegan. And she would be seen as an alternative movement because it's against the grain of the normal processed food eating that we are supplied. These trends such as transcendental meditation and microbiotic diets, you'll see these alternative choices towards food. If you can think of some other great ones, share it. Holistic medicine is one as well, but share it in Yellow Dig. Yeah, always communicate. So resistance movements such as alt-right political groups, anti-abortion groups, the Ku Klux Klan, the Minutemen Project, private individuals. Interesting, because resistance movements now would be pro-abortion groups, because anti-abortion with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, we start seeing the shifts and oscillations in how social change can change, right? So you see a lot of different dynamics of what resistance movements can mean, and they change and fluctuate throughout the times of norms and values and laws and things that are in place currently. So the types of social movements broken down differently for you again is that there's reformative movements, change something specific about the social structure, and that's the key word there. Revolutionary movement, change every aspect of society. Rebel, this is the rebel category by Merton we talked about in a few lectures ago. Religious redemptive movements, it's really just meaning seeking, provoking interchange or spiritual growth through either religion or redemptive purposes such as anonymous groups, Alcoholics Anonymous groups, or going to rehabs. Alternative movements, self-improvement and limited, specific changes to individuals' beliefs and behaviors, holistic medicine, alternative eating things such as this, right? And then resistance movements. We want to prevent or undo social structures. We see this right now with what's happening with SCOTUS, looking at Griswold v. Connecticut, looking at Levin v. Virginia, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. You start seeing the resistance movements that are trying to either prevent or to undo the change. So they can fall on both gambits to the side of the dichotomy of understanding. So social movements base themselves on collective behavior, as I mentioned before. And if we look at Amberle's 1966 types of social movements, we see how it works from a social individual level. Partial change would be alternative, right? This is the individual level, but at a societal level, it would be reformative. Total change would be redemptive at an individual level. I'm going to change things about me, but it'd be transformative when we go to the societal level. Regressive or resistance movements prevent social change, keep the status quo. What you're looking at is that we don't want change, return to normal during the pandemic. You heard that a lot. That's a big point of this. Interesting ideas here. If any of you have any thoughts, please share this on Yellow Dig. I think it would be fantastic to share. This is a really big one here for you, and I think it's important that it sinks in with you. I'm not going to play the video I have after this slide, but it's by Derek Silver. I think you should look it up. Look up Derek Silver's tipping points. Again, look up Derek Silver's tipping points. I think you really should. But essentially, Granovetter talked about the collective behavior threshold model. Essentially, it's varied on how people interact, and this can be used towards looking at movements such as protests and other things, right? So low threshold to join. This is the instigators, those who jump in first. They're the hellraisers. They're good to go. They don't need a reason. You can use low thresholds actually to cause chaos inside protests, to cause them to become unrally and become actually no longer seen as non-combative protests. The person who jumps in is ready to start some shit. Problematic. Medium threshold, these people will join in when they see that they're the first. They're not the first. This is the FOMO group. They're going to join in because they don't want to not be on the right side of history. Scapegoat theory covers this pretty well. If you're familiar with it, feel free to look it up. High thresholds, they may or may not join in. Think about the video that you may have watched or you should have watched, where you saw the person who decided not to start clapping to the guy who was speaking gobbledygook to show the idea that people will stand up and clap. They're going to join if they are, and they're not going to join if they're not going to. There's nothing you can do with high threshold. They really just decide on their own based upon if it is in their interests. So this Granovetter's idea of the threshold model is really important. The Tipping Point by Derek Silver covers this. It's important to understand the different thresholds, especially as we go into a very politically driven time period. Who's low, who's high, who's medium. Figure this out for yourself. And I would definitely, in your time in college, really figure out where you fall on this. Are you somebody who's good to go? Are you a hellraiser? Are you somebody who really just doesn't want to not have be on the right side of history, or you just have FOMO, or are you just kind of steadfast and kind of stubborn? Are you just not going to do something unless you want to do it? Who are you? I'd love to hear. This is the video I play. Feel free to look up the YouTube. It's way better than this clip. It's a good clip for class, but not a good clip for online. So look it up. Derek Silver's Thresholds. It's called Tipping Points. So let's talk about the mobilization stages brought up by Loomer and Tilley in 1978. It's broken down into 4 different social movement stages. There's the preliminary, people recognize an issue and a leader emerges. Coalescence, people join together and organize. Institutionalization, the movement becomes an organization. And decline, the movement successfully creates change or loses momentum. This is the process that you'll see. To start it, we want to find an issue. We join together and organize, realize that we need a leadership establishment. So we get institutionalization, the movement becomes organized, which means it has a little bit more of a bureaucratic method. And then if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's just the reality of it. Social movements and organizations, again, social movements as organizations, what they do once they institutionalize, they select leaders, gain resources and funding, recruit members, create objectives. Disruptive actions gain attention for the cause and the escalation until there is a change from authority. So if you have seen the movie Crip Camp, you would think it might be gang related. It's not. It has to do with ADA, the American Disabilities Association, and looks at how the laws were passed to make the ADA. You'll see a lot of actions by disruptive actions of protesting and sitting in buildings and whatnot. You also see social movement coalitions, people joining together. It was actually the Black Panthers who helped support the people in the Crip Camp to be able to maintain food and water when they were there so that the movement could hold, because the longer they were able to disrupt society, the longer that people started noticing. So sometimes you have to break the system to be able to see the change, because if nobody wants to see it, then nobody sees it, what are they going to care? But if it disrupts day-to-day life, then people feel a little annoyed. So sometimes disruptive actions are necessary. And in the coalitions of movements working together, it tends to be that we find a common goal to create the change we want to see. And maybe this is something we need to do for what's going on with Roe v. Wade. Maybe we need to find a way to really show with disruptive actions that this needs to not be what's happening. We cannot allow all these laws to be able to impact the minority groups and the people who are impacted by them, by those who are so far disattached that they don't understand the impact these are going to have. So think about this. Disruptive actions, important, but also the social movement coalitions working together to make sure that change happens and finding common ground when we realize that we're all facing the same battle. So complex system, sure, but we have the idea of the social movement outcomes, essentially complexity of a social issue leading to change. We want to do it, sure. The movement may create awareness and motivate policy. Great, we see the movements happen, right? New laws and policies enacted years after the movement. The video in Crip Camp talks about this, that it was 10, 15 years until action happened, and then even longer for the long term of it. And then they had to go back and defend it again because new law tried to remove it. Look at Roe v. Wade. Many sweeping changes or could be smaller reforms, and then it just kind of keeps perpetuating itself in this circle, right? You're just circling around and we're seeing if the movement gets there. So there's a lot of dynamics to it. So y'all are almost there. You're almost done. Fantastic. Make sure that you keep on top. You do not want to mess up here. Finish your assignments, do your yellow digs. Don't fall short until the end. We're going to cover this last deck, which is a shorter deck, just talking more about the impacts of environmental sociology. I will see you in that video. I look forward to it. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. Hope you're having a great day. Let me know if there's anything I can do. Professor McQueen out.